African American and Latino students are lagging behind white classmates in one subject after another. An achievement gap that, by one estimate, costs us hundreds of billions of dollars in wages that will not be earned, jobs that will not be done, and purchases that will not be made.
President Obama has put his finger on a very serious threat to the future of economic productivity. Underachievers of color are a huge drag on the economy, especially when you factor in their higher propensity to commit crime. Their numbers are also growing rapidly relative to those of whites, whose numbers are in decline. If the achievement gap between whites and blacks and browns persists, then, as Obama suggests, the cost to the economy will be enormous, hundreds of billions, and ultimately trillions in the years ahead. To my knowledge, no effort to close the achievement gap has succeeded on any level in any meaningful sense, in any geographical area, in any country on earth, in any state, in any county, in any city with representative populations of the respective races in question. Blacks always end up underperforming browns, who underperform whites.
African American and Latino students are lagging behind white classmates in one subject after another. Costs us hundreds of billions of dollars,
It's a spontaneous order that emerges naturally when individual academic performances are aggregated based on race. The outcomes are consistent and nearly 100% predictable, even though nobody intends the outcomes to be the way they are or takes any effort to plan the outcomes. The No Child Left Behind Act, which was signed into law by President George W. Bush, sought to close the so-called achievement gap nationwide through central federal planning. It's failing, of course, and is doomed to fail, but the more the central planners fail, the more money they demand to pursue ever more aggressive versions of their neo-Marxist racial leveling agenda. No amount of social engineering will ever close the achievement gap, short of actually preventing whites from trying to reach their full potential. That's undoubtedly the direction some would like to go in, but there is no case to be made that going in that direction would be beneficial to the U.S. economy. People of all races benefit from living in a country where there are highly educated doctors, engineers, entrepreneurs providing goods and services to people of all races, even if the people who happen to be on the leading edge of providing these goods and services are white. Now, if you accept Obama's premise that the achievement gap has deleterious consequences for the American economy, and you accept my premise that the achievement gap is natural and enduring and can never be eliminated, then we are left with a problem that requires a solution of an entirely different kind than that proposed by the political establishment. The problem of accelerating economic decline due to the decline of the white population relative to the rapidly increasing brown and black populations due to immigration and their higher birth rates requires a policy framework that would result in less black and brown immigration, lower black and brown birth rates, higher white birth rates, and higher white immigration. Now, it would not be easy to reverse the dominant demographic trends in America, but it could be done, and for relatively little cost compared to the government's failed efforts at social engineering around the world and at home. No amount of money the U.S. government sends to the Islamic world can transform the Islamic world into a peaceful, democratic place. And no amount of money directed toward the public school establishment can produce test scores among blacks that are as high as those among whites. In fact, after a certain base level of funding schools to meet the bare minimum requirements for delivering instruction, spending additional money after that has virtually no effect on student performance. And black students, on a per-pupil basis, actually receive slightly more funding on a per-pupil basis than do white students, and yet they still underperform. Now, when the government spends money on actual, usable, tangible, functional infrastructure, such as roads and bridges, then the government actually creates some economic value for the economy. Create is not exactly the right word, but it at least leaves the public with something of value that it can use in exchange for the tax dollars that the government took from the public. Even if it's a bridge to nowhere and is 95% wasteful, there'll still be a slight use for it, whereas much of what the government does in the Department of Education and all these other bureaucracies are either have absolutely zero effect or net negative effect. So infrastructure spending is among the least objectionable forms of spending that the government undertakes. Well, what about the nation's human infrastructure? That is what ultimately drives the economy. And even Barack Obama knows that. So the question we are left with is, what specifically can the United States do to improve its human infrastructure? More importantly, how could it do so in a constitutional way that respects the rights of all citizens? I have some ideas, but I don't have any definite answers. If you have some ideas, please share them in your comments below.